Friday, September 13th, 2024. Did you know Friday?
I just realized it this morning.
I know. Coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic, historic Wall Center. And if you're heading to a game or if you got your tickets, extend your game night with a staycation downtown Vancouver. Book the Harrison price right here at the Wall. Call the hotel 604-331-1000. Some blackout dates supply based on availability. Matt Sakaris, alongside Blake Price. Mike Rogerson, 4-time Juno Award winner, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up on the very first Canucks game day of the 24-25 season. More on that in a second. But first, our daily poll question. Does Jonathan Lekkerimäki play a game for the Vancouver Canucks this season? Yes or no? You can vote at our X and YouTube channels. And actually, our poll question's on E's and O's because we did not specify in the text Vancouver Canucks. So you have a few jokesters already saying, of course he does. The Abbotsford Canucks.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
that's not what we were getting at.
No,
not what we were getting at. I think the answer is yes, but I want to be abundantly clear. If I'm the Vancouver Canucks, it is not a goal of mine. It's not something that anybody needs to happen. But I think that we will come to a point, maybe at the end of the season when they're playing out the string and they want to give some guys a rest, or if that is the strict definition, play a game for the Vancouver Canucks. Yes, I think he finds his way by hook or by crook into the lineup.
So you hit on one side of this. There is two ways that this can happen. One would be very good for the Canucks. One would be a very bad sign. If this kid and it was interesting to hear Dave Hall of Canucks Army talk about it earlier this week. If this kid is awesome in training camp and preseason and forces the hand of the Vancouver Canucks, and look, minus forward injuries, I don't think there's any chance that he's on the opening night roster. But if this kid, for whatever reason, is further advanced than one would think as a first-year North American player, that would be extraordinary. And if he forces his way into the lineup at some point this season on merit, on performance, what an outstanding development for this organization and for this team in its competitive cycle to have a first-round pick, a goal scorer, another offensive weapon to be able to drop in to your forward group. The flip side, if he plays games, could be you're ravaged by injury in the forward ranks, or the season's gone to pot, and so you're taking a look at the kids, and God knows we have done enough play the kids segments on this program. So here's what he's up against. So you tell me, Price. For him to get into a Vancouver Canucks NHL game this year, he is going to have to leapfrog Phil DiGiuseppe, Nils Oman, Sammy Blais if he signed off his PTO, Arshdeep Bains, Linus Karlsson, Atu Ratu. Those are the 6 players with NHL experience that right now, as we enter Young Stars and enter training camp, would be ahead of Lekkerimäki in the pecking order.
Did you mention Sprong?
Well, I guess Sprong's on the team.
Yeah.
I'm looking at PDG, Oman, Blais, and maybe even Bains, as we talked about yesterday, fighting for the 13th forward spot. If they keep 14 forwards, then maybe 2 of those guys, but I think they're more likely to keep the 2 defensemen. And then you got Karlsson and Ratu as guys who I expect will start in the American Hockey League. But as we see with the line combinations that Manny Malhotra has put together for Young Stars in the opening game here, Bains, Ratu, and Lekkerimäki are the first line. Bains and Ratu both having played NHL games.
Cody Severson from Canucks Army, hot taking in response to the poll question. I bet Lekkerimäki impresses enough at training camp to get an 8-game run to start the season. His work rate in Abbotsford was above average relative to his peers. He showed an eye for the defensive side of the puck that you don't typically see from a shoot first winger. Those are the kinds of things he would need to show Rick Tocchet. I mean, he would need to show Rick Tocchet that he is more than just a PP2 rifle, you know.
Well, that's another great point, Blake. It's not like this team is wanting for power play options.
No,
like that would have been a route that maybe gets him further ahead. But you're talking about an at best power play too. Again, minus injuries. If you were to have injuries,
Matt, he's almost in better shape at last year's training camp. Like if he is this himself, if the circumstances were the same as last year's camp, he might be in better shape. But with them bolstering everything on the wings as they have, they're going to give long leashes to a bunch of these guys that they brought in.
Yeah.
And then you're really battling with grinders on the fourth line, which are just not your profile. That's not who you're trying to beat out, really. You're trying to beat out guys like Sprong and Heinen and all that, and they're just going to be given a lot longer leash to fail because they just got brought in themselves.
Yeah, and the other thing that we need to, he would have to crack the opening 12 forwards, right? Lineup, not just roster.
Yeah,
because it makes no sense to take a 20-year-old first-round pick and park him in the press box.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, and we'll hear from Coach Tocchet here at some point, but he almost would have to crack the top six. Right? Do you think they'd play him in a Vasily Podkolzin down lineup,
not in the
six
fourth
role?
I mean, if they were pretty sure they could get a skilled third line rolling, then maybe. But
anyways,
I doubt it.
I just can't see it out of camp and preseason. I could see it this year at some point. It'd be awesome if it was on merit. It would be horrible if it was a rash of injuries. It would be even worse if it's because the season's a failure and you're looking at people for next year. So I voted no because of it. But I understand Canucks fans are very optimistic about this player and about his development and about his course, which could chart to the National Hockey League.
But again, they clinched the playoffs with a week to go, 4 games left.
Then maybe,
you know,
as a look-see before the playoffs, because then, you know,
want to rest Besser for a game, things like that.
Plus, if we need goals in the playoffs, if for whatever reason we can't score in the playoffs, would you consider playing him there if he spent most of the year in the AHL, but you're just so desperate for goal scoring as we saw last year at one point? Well, at several points in both playoff series against Nashville and Edmonton. Let's get to our top story. It's brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Game day, the first Canucks game day of the 24-25 season. The Canucks Young Stars face the Edmonton Oilers Young Stars at the South Okanagan Events Center in Penticton. And we get this question every year. Yes, you can watch these games. You can stream them at Vancouver Canucks, off of VancouverCanucks.com. And you can see young Lekkerimäki playing alongside Atu Ratu and Archdeep Bains, Surrey's Archdeep Bains. At least that's how Coach Malhotra has them lined up in morning skate and practice.
Yeah, again, good opportunity for a bunch of the more prominent players at Young Stars to start with that top line. The top pairings interesting as well with Kudratsov and DPD. So looking forward to the season starting in this regard. And it's a ramp up, obviously, to main camp. Looking forward to seeing who gets the invite to main camp, incidentally.
Yes. No, that's the other thing here.
Who earns the battlefield promotion. And that's the first sort of, hey, you did good at Young Stars. And it really doesn't mean a whole lot because we've seen guys make that promotion, but still not get a look at preseason. But it's your first, hey, you did enough. You did your job at Young Stars camp. Come on up to play with the big boys.
Yeah, and look, for players like Lekkerimäki and Elias Paterson, the defenseman, EPD, DPD, you would suspect that they will be brought to main training camp because the organization has high hopes for these players.
Wants them to get a feel for it.
Exactly. Anticipate them being NHL players at some time. So we're going to want them to see what it's like on the ice with NHL superstars like Quinn Hughes and that style of camp and that style of competition under head coach Rick Tocchet and his staff, because that's the other important part. You mentioned Kudrayatsev, like that's a more interesting name in this regard, right? Because he's accomplished quite a bit in the OHL. He's been a good player there. He is signed to an ELC.
Was he defenseman of the year in the last year?
No, but he often ranked high in those coaches polls, where they would do polls of OHL coaches and ask them their opinions on players around the league, like best defensive defenseman and things like that. So he oftentimes did well in those coaches polls, got a lot of love there.
Perrick won it, and he's still.
Well, I was going to say, and it's 33 goals from last year, the 9th overall pick, who will also be at Young Stars, a Calgary Flames draftee. But Kudrayatsev, Minio, seeing them at main camp is perhaps a little less certain. And of course, we talk about training camp, folks, and it's just such a different animal than it was back in the day. If you're a young Canucks fan, then perhaps you're only familiar with it being a weekend at a destination, sometimes Whistler, this year Penticton. Back in the day, camp used to be a long haul, right? Camp used to cover the better part of 2 weekends a week and have all sorts of, taxing physical requirements for the players. It's a little bit more like a few skates and a scrimmage at this stage of the game.
Yeah, it's a weigh-in. I mean, you get the testing is an important thing, and it's 3 days of practice before you're into back-to-backs. And we should mention too, looking a little bit ahead of main camp, the first 4 preseason games really act as 2 because they're pairs of back-to-backs. So the chances of carryover from one night to the next, well, there's maybe a handful, and I mean it sincerely, like 4 to 5 guys might play both of those nights. So it's effectively acting like a 4-game preseason for the most part, of which I would say the veterans probably play 3. I don't know that many of the hardcores play 4. Maybe they do, but it's impossible to imagine a guy playing 5 preseason games. I don't see it happening with the way that they've scheduled it.
And of course, preseason gets underway on September 24th when the Vancouver Canucks and Seattle Kraken, their regional rival down the I-5, get together. So 11 days away from a Canucks
not too far
preseason game before it gets going. What are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, they're pretty excited, obviously, about a variety of things. And speaking of variety, you can grab not 1, but 2 delicious mix packs from Yellow Dog Spirits for the upcoming weekend. Hi there, hard iced tea mix packs include the lemon, the peach, and the raspberry tea. We've got a couple flavors of that behind me. And then you got the Freezy vodka soda mix pack, including the purple, blue, and white Freezies. Lots of options, all packed up into the 2 mix packs. A great way to entertain through the weekend. And not that you need a break from beer, but it's kind of nice to get something a little. People are into the cocktails and the different drinks nowadays.
What is it you like? And our friends Brad McDonald and Dan from Yellow Dog delivered it here.
Technically that's a brew. Gosa is just a type of beer. But the ginger lime Gosa is out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend it.
Canadian men's national team Jesse Marsch had a gander at the fridge.
Yeah, he was a little jealous. Yeah.
I said, Coach, you want to take some beers home? No.
Clean living.
That's right. Okay. The aforementioned Manny Malhotra, and of course, once a Vancouver Canuck, that perfect third line centerman who had won all those faceoffs, killed all those penalties, was a leader and conscience of the room for the President's Trophy winning Vancouver Canucks before he suffered that horrible eye injury. But he is back. He has begun his coaching career, of course, coached with the Toronto Maple Leafs last year. He's a Toronto guy originally, married a BC gal, Joanne Nash, sister of Steve Nash. And he's back here under Canucks Sports and Entertainment umbrella, coaching the Abbotsford Canucks. He spoke with reporters in Penticton yesterday, and we'll start with Lekkerimäki. And here is Manny being asked about Lekkerimäki having to manage expectations.
Well, the main goal for all these guys is to set them up and put them into situations where they're going to be successful and put their best foot forward. With all eyes of the organization on them, you want them to show well. So, yeah, by putting them with Rats and Bainsy, it's going to put them in a good situation. Obviously, two very offensive-minded guys, but at the same time, they have the wherewithal to be smart defensively and make sure he's in the right spots and communicate with them.
Few things there. Number one, you get dropped in as head coach, but you're already mid-season form. Rats and Bainsy, the nicknames of Atu Ratu and Arshdeep Bains. Secondly, one of the ways you manage expectations for a top prospect is when you get asked a question about the top prospects, you broaden it, right? Well, not just him, but everybody.
Yeah, you don't ever want to put weight on the shoulders of the young players. So.
And Jonathan Lekkerimäki did meet the media yesterday. It was a series of short and quick answers. He sounded a little bit nervous to be talking.
I'll say this though,
in his second language.
I see. I'll just say the nerves. Period. He speaks English very well.
Well, they all do. I mean,
Elias Paterson, the defenseman, also. I mean, these guys have got a decent. These guys are ahead of, but they're ahead of forward Elias Paterson. Like forward Elias Paterson didn't speak English as well as those two guys do now. So they're ahead of the game.
Very few Swedish players who aren't absolutely fluent in English by the time they are drafted and introduced to North American hockey media.
That's why I was shocked that he beat Elias Paterson.
We were talking. I remember Ben Brown of the Canucks when Paterson was drafted, and bring him over to our table and just saying, "Hey guys, just so you know, like the English isn't quite as in command with this player. I know you're accustomed to Swedish players speaking fluent English." Paterson sat down between us and immediately cracked a joke in English.
Oh yeah, he still had his person.
And we were like, no, like he's he might be a little more nervous about it, but to our ears, it was perfect. The only other one that I can remember saying I'm not the most comfortable in English was a 16 or 17-year-old Adam Larson way back when at a World Juniors. And needless to say, he's had a pretty good NHL career as well. Lekkerimäki told reporters in Penticton that he worked on getting stronger this summer so that he could win puck battles. So clearly he's aware of one of the bigger transitions that a forward, a winger, a goal scorer has to make, going from the big ice of the European game, where oftentimes you're going to have possession more often, that possession's going to be more easily gained, that you have more room to operate and create offense, to the North American game, where more often than not, the puck's going to be a 50-50 battle. It's more difficult to retrieve, and it's more difficult to keep possession of as bigger players in closer proximity bear down on you. So that is absolutely the appropriate messaging from the player and understanding what he is in for here, outside of the little cameo he had with the Abbey Canucks last year in his first full season in North America. Manny has already mentioned it, putting Lekkerimäki with Ratu and Bains. Let's hear more from the Abbotsford Canucks coach on the top line at Young Stars.
Well, number one, it's all about managing expectations. Obviously, the draft is a huge part of a young player's career, and it's a big highlight. But once you get into this situation, you're going against men that are competing for jobs. So it becomes a very different environment. And the biggest thing is for them to feel comfortable in this environment. Continue to play your game, execute with the puck. But the biggest thing is just recognizing it's all about putting in the work, focusing on the details of the game and of the structure of the game. But at the same time, you want to implement what makes you a special player.
And honestly, we sometimes deride or chide not so young stars, 24, 25-year-olds, in some cases with a lot of professional games on their resume, playing in these tournaments. But, I liked what Manny said there. Okay, you're a high draft pick. Great. Now you're dropped in with men and men who have more experience and have played this game a little bit and are also hungry as well. So
in a lot of ways,
that may actually be a pretty good test for some of these, young Canucks, the teenage and 20-year-old young stars that are there.
In a lot of ways, it's helpful for every team that takes part in young stars to have a few older guys around, because otherwise it's just a junior showcase, and I think everybody wants a different look than that. They want to get a little bit more of a seasoned ramp up. For a lot of these players, they are going to the AHL. Some of them are going back down, obviously, but they want to use it more for the players that are ramping into the AHL, and they're good training wheels to have some bigger, more mature players out there, savvy or players,
right,
that are craftier than your common OHL or WHL guy that you've already proven you can play against, right? So
I remember Brad Treliving, when he was the GM of Calgary, telling us that when we had him on location at the neighborhood patio a couple of years ago. He goes, "This is not simply an exercise in comparing reserve lists.
No,
you want your players to get something out of it a little more than taking a look at who won the actual games between the four franchises and the players they've provided to this tournament." Let's hear one more time from the coach, Coach Malhotra. His opinion on the first day. They started yesterday. His opinion on the first day of camp.
They did well. Obviously, the first day of camp, there's going to be some jitters out there. But as far as execution with the puck, the guys were on the pace of practice. I was quite pleased with, and then working on some technical pieces. There's going to be some blips and some hiccups, but we were able to talk through those things. And for me, it was a good day one.
Yes, there are nerves.
Yeah,
because for a lot of these kids, this is...
You put on the color, you put it on the crest.
Absolutely. That just pulling that sweater on, even a practice jersey, pulling that jersey on, seeing the NHL crest in the middle of your chest, knowing that the eyes of an NHL front office and NHL coaching staff are upon you. That's a big deal. Well, you haven't made it per se.
No,
but it is clearly a significant step in a young player's life and career.
It's a yard marker. And,
for sure.
And for the draft picks, they're like, oh wow, this is really happening. They, if they were drafted in the 5th or 6th round, they got the news via phone or watching online. Now they're actually wearing the sweater. It looks a lot different and feels a lot different. And they might have been a pro development camp there or the summer development camp. But there's referees out there. It's a game atmosphere. It's a different thing. And then for the invites, I think of a guy like a Ty Halliburton, who's a Vancouver Giant, just by living in BC, and he's a BC boy too, he just knows what the Canucks mean to the market. And even if you were a Vancouver Giant from Manitoba, you know what the Canucks, you live in this market, what how this market eats up the Vancouver Canucks, and all of a sudden you're wearing it. It'd be pretty crazy for those guys too.
Oh, no doubt. Let's move on here. Dollyball reporting that the Canucks and free agent goaltender Kevin Lankinen are effectively playing a game of chicken right now. That every day that goes by and every day that creeps closer to NHL training camp where Kevin Lankinen doesn't have a contract and isn't getting offers at the freight and term that he wants is helpful for the Canucks and their desire to lure him here on a deal that they're comfortable with. And of course, maybe this is why we haven't heard more publicly about Thatcher Demko and his status.
Well, I think also it's buying time. Like, the Canucks don't want to fully commit, and until they are fully clear on the scenario. And remember, they don't get their official mitts on. And yes, there's some matriculation, some soft overlap of strength and conditioning coaches into the offseason that is allowed by the National Hockey League. But truly, they do want to get their mitts and eyes and ears on Thatcher Demko next week, probably early to mid, and really know where they're at by the time for him to heal as well, and then make a decision. And I have no doubt that they are keeping the flirting alive and well, but they probably don't want to put ink on paper right now. So it is, as much as it may have the outside look of being a game of chicken, I think they're happy enough with this, as long as they feel like they've got the fish on the hook, right? Like they don't want to lose the fish entirely, but they're happy playing with the fish here a little bit before they land it.
And of course, some of this has to do with LTIR and the Vancouver Canucks not wanting to start the season in LTIR. Patrick Alvin messaged this a couple of times over the summer saying,
in an ideal world, yeah.
Well, yeah, when you're into LTIR, it's dollar in, dollar out. It's harder to make trades. Of course, they struck out at the trade deadline, if not earlier in the season, with their acquisitions, in part because they did not have a lot of salary cap space available to them. So getting Lankinen at their price and being able to fashion an opening night roster that is not in LTIR. And remember, last year, the cap geeks were, lavishing praise on the Canucks for the immaculate roster, right? That they were exactly on the number, had maximized
pennies
all
away.
exactly,
yes.
Had maximized all space, the likes of which we had never seen before. And in fact, 2 years ago, they got pretty darn close as well. So there's been a little bit of salary cap magic from this front office in the last 2 seasons when setting the roster. I anticipate that they want to do continue that, but also, as they have stated as a goal, not go into LTIR. I've argued the season is too important, and if your goaltending has any question around it off the start of the year, just bite the bullet and go into LTIR. Sign Lankinen, bite the bullet, secure the crease. You've been a little less You've been a little less committed to that. You're a little bit more, stay out of LTIR. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a little greedy, but if you can hold on to that valuable cap space and not have to sign that expensive insurance policy, and relatively expensive insurance policy, because we're talking about a guy that really could be third or fourth on the depth chart. Not many teams boast, $1.7 million cap hits for a third or fourth string goalie. You'd like to avoid that if you can at all costs. So I see what they're doing, and it's a high wire act a little bit. You're flirting with disaster because Kevin Lankinen can sign with anybody else too at a moment's notice. But I guess if the Canucks too also feel like there isn't much of a market for Kevin Lankinen, in that everybody else is secure enough in the crease that they don't think that they're really competing against anybody, maybe they feel like they can continue this on for another few days before they have to make a decision.
Yeah. Next week, I think, is going to be a very big week on this call, particularly when the Canucks go through their medicals, get to training camp, and of course, in a lot of cases, meet the media. We'll see what awaits Thatcher Demko there. Forgot to mention, there was another youngster's note I wanted to get in here. Help me out. No Sawyer Miniu tonight. They have more players than they are able to dress. So with 3 games over the course of the weekend, 1 here tonight, 1 on Sunday, 1 on Monday, there will be some guys who circle out and then circle back in. But
morning skates are morning skates at the best of times, folks. Never mind at Young Stars. But it looks like Minio will be on the outside looking in. Look like Anthony Romani, who's got some, just some curiosity appeal, might be sitting tonight too. But no, it looks like he's going to be in. So for those of you that might be driving up on the weekend too, in forecasting who you might see on Sunday for the afternoon game there, I would guess then that Minio draws in for that one.
Yeah, Minio, of course, a third-round pick, 89th overall in the 23 entry draft from the Seattle Thunderbirds program. His Kamloops kid. He played one game with the Abbotsford Canucks last year, a left-shooting defenseman. Romani's a fascination because when you put up 58 goals and 111 points, I don't care what league it is.
Yeah,
you know, you're going to catch people's attention.
You should be given a little bit of respect too, like
right.
And you've got skills.
Yeah.
So
now he did it as a draft overager. He turned 19 this summer, but in 68 games with the North Bay Battalion last year, he was damn near 2 points per game. So we'll see. He was the 6th-round pick of the Canucks this past year, 162nd overall, a right shooting winger. So yes, he has a little bit of fascination around him because of those totals he put up in the OHL. You mentioned this story to me just before we were about to hit the live button here and start the show, but we have a young hockey player who is willing to lead the charge. And the charge I'm talking about is a CHL player to the NCAA. Braxton Whitehead, a 20-year-old who has played for the Regina Pats of the WHL, is going to Arizona State University.
He's leaping into a gray area that is occurring right now because of a class action suit against the NCAA about CHL players and their ability to play.
College hockey. Rylan Masterton, an OHL player, is pursuing this. So is Braxton Whitehead, a Arizona State or a Regina Pat going to Arizona State. We've covered this story before.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, NCAA schools have forever told teenage hockey players, the second you step on the ice in a CHL league, WHL, OHL, Quebec Major Junior League, you are ineligible to be a scholarship athlete here because they consider that a pro league.
Because you get $80 a week for lunch in the WHL. Now, of course, with NIL deals in NCAA,
right?
NCAA athletes can, by theory, make way more than a CHL athlete can ever dream of.
Right. So Masterton has sued the NCAA in New York federal court, and Whitehead he's made a verbal commitment, and he says he intends on joining the program next year.
And this will be very interesting.
Yeah. And they're viewed as sort of, they're being viewed in the same light as Ed O'Bannon. If you're not familiar, a great star, a national champion with UCLA basketball, drafted into the NBA, had a shorter career because of injuries, but he took on the NCAA on name, image, and likeness, and he won. And so he was viewed as the Pied Piper that has opened up what is a whole new, a paradigm shift, tectonic plate shifting in the NCAA, where kids now can go and profit off the fame and celebrity that they have playing NCAA football, playing NCAA basketball, or other sports.
The good news, bad news trickle down of this is NCAA hockey just gets a lot better. Just the quality of hockey is going to be higher. But, of course, now you've maybe got one player that takes up spots in two different leagues. Like at one point, Whitehead would have beaten unknown player X out for a spot in the CHL. But now Whitehead is also going to cross over and take somebody's spot in NCAA hockey. So the same player can sort of X out another player in both streams. And previously that player was only going to be canceled once. So it can clog things up a little bit. It might reduce the exposure to certain players. You often saw late bloomers in NCAA. Are you not going to see the NCAA late bloomer anymore now? Because you're going to have, rather than that lower end player that's allowed the chance to bloom late, you're going to have a CHL player taking that spot who's further along. We'll see.
Yes. So we could be seeing some significant changes to Canadian junior hockey, or at least the development path for Canadian hockey players. Once this lawsuit gets its day in court, or once it's settled, and of course, after some of these kids attempt to enroll and see what the repercussions
What's your gut
are.
tell you? Good news or bad news? Like, it's fair news. I think it's fair because the NIL thing has made it fair. There's no question about that.
For sure.
Do you think it's ultimately, does the hockey model benefit from this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so just let me say a couple things on this. Number one, I have never believed that taking a kid out of full-time school, out of his hometown, putting him on a bus somewhere between Moose Jaw and Portland is good for overall development. Not necessarily talking hockey here. I'm talking just human development. So there's that. Number two, being on a post-secondary campus exposes you to many different people, many different ideas, many different pursuits, interests, what have you, that may do you well. So I've always said, it's easy for me to say, I have no children. You perhaps are better to chime on this. But I would very well, in fact, we have friends who have a pretty good hockey playing son. And the mom said to us the other day, if he could play in the BCHL and go to the NCAA on scholarship, we would be thrilled. And I said to her, that really should be the goal. If because that's a pretty sizable goal already, right? That already places you in a pretty high echelon of young hockey players. The notion that a 16-year-old who is a long shot to make the NHL should be taken out of school, that's not something that I would be getting behind as a parent.
It's a tough slog. It's a tough slog. Bumped into Gary Volk yesterday, the day before. He's got a son in Division I hockey, and proud as punch. And
and look, if your kid's Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, where it's pretty obvious he's amongst the best players in his age group, regardless of where you go and play, totally different matter. And of course, one of those guys picked NCAA hockey. But I think in a lot of cases, you've got junior hockey teams selling false hope to parents and players, and you have players and parents who are somewhat delusional about the young man's future and potential to play in the NHL.
Well, that's a rampant issue. Delusional parents and their kids' chances.
Yeah, but the alternative, when offered the two pathways, or at least the two pathways that we have forever known. So go play junior A and get an NCAA scholarship and walk out of there with a degree that could set you up for the rest of life. If, believe it or not, hockey isn't your vocation. That sounds pretty good to me. That has always sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens here, but particularly since a lot of the sort of old guard of the CHL, I saw Dave Branch retire, the big party for him, a longtime OHL commissioner. We'll see what the new vanguard here of CHL leadership has to say about all this and how they go about making changes, if they make any changes at all, given the development system.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to need almost a generation to know how this has affected the talent pool.
Yes,
but as I said, it's fair given the other rules handed down. It's just fair.
Show announcement here, and look, we've heard some of you who have messaged and saying, "Oh, where's Grady at?" Well, we were waiting for Grady to make this announcement on his own time, and sure enough, he did yesterday. Our former producer and director of content here, that Grady is moving on to a new opportunity at Sports Tree Limited, and we want to thank Grady for all his efforts and his energies here with Sekeres and Price. and also wish him the best in his new opportunity, always and forever in his corner.
Yeah. Can't wait to see what his next chapter looks like. Very happy for him. And he's a foundational brick here. And he's always welcome to come back and poke his head in and share a yellow dog.
Yeah, he talked about there was an honor and a dream come true, creating content and being a part of content outlay here with Paterson Price and Rink-Wide Vancouver and Canucks Army, and that he was proud of his work, and he really ought to be, because he did do good work here. So all the best to Grady. Mike Rogerson, Jacob Lazar have been producing content for us over the course of the summer, and that will continue. So there's the announcement, and I hope that satisfies some of the curious who have been asking us about Grady. Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta. Greta, fantastic spot to catch the game throughout the season. Quick walk to the Rinker Stadium, go-to spot for food, drinks, and fun, that arcade. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. JPat's going to join us here. Jeff will be up at training camp in Penticton when it gets going next week. But we talk a lot of young stars here. We talk about the crease and whether or not it behooves the Canucks to go out and sign a player, fortify that crease if there's any doubt about Demko and or Sheloves. We talk about some of the prospects they have here, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, whether this is the year they should be all in and look at these prospects as much as trade pieces as future Vancouver Canucks. Full hearty discussion on the Vancouver Canucks and the young stars with Jeff coming up. And then Jesse Marsch, the new head coach of the Canadian men's national team. He was hired in May. Less than a month later, they were getting their tails kicked in Holland against the Netherlands. We worried about the runway that Coach Marsch had building up to the Copa, the new expanded Copa, whether it was enough. Then they go out and they tie France in a friendly. And, well, you know what happened at the Copa. Made it to the knockout stage. Couldn't get through Lionel Messi in Argentina, but played an absolute thriller against Suarez in Uruguay, ultimately losing on penalties and finishing fourth. But needless to say, a hell of a ride for Canadian soccer fans.
And setting history last week with the first win on U.S. soil in over 60 years. So it's been a nice short run to this point, but a lot of expectation, a lot of big events coming up. So we'll get into that with Jesse Marsch. Speaking of Messi, by the way, Messi could be back this week for Inter Miami.
So, oh, really?
Yeah.
Good.
So that's good. He's available for selection. We'll see what that means.
That's good.
Yeah. Good for the league. That turned into quite the injury at Copa.
Has he been off for these 2 months?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I can't. He has been successful personally. Inter Miami has been successful. I'm not sure the great Messi experiment has yet been successful. Yes, he brought a lot of eyeballs in those early days, but now it's about sustaining, maintaining, growing. And boy, I'd just like to see him interviewed more, Blake. I would just like to know more about him.
Well, they also need to win the league. Remember, they won League's Cup, but they haven't won the league yet. Yeah. So they have to perform in the playoffs here. Still first place in the Eastern Conference, though, by a country mile. So they should be okay.
Bet365 time, our bets of the day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud sponsor, Paterson Price. I'm going to go NFL here.
Okay.
New York Jets coming off the short week, of course. They're into Tennessee, where the Titans played great defense last week, and not for a blocked punt and a terrible decision by the quarterback, they would have beat the Bears and beat the Bears handily. I love those home dogs. I think you're paying a little bit of a New York and Aaron Rodgers premium if you like gangrene in this game. I'm getting 3.5 with a home dog that I think is going to play darn good defense. Love those home dogs. Titans and the points.
I'm looking at the Whitecaps with no Brian White up top. Ryan Gauld's going to be your striker. And with Stuart Armstrong feeding him, Gauld likes to be the opener too. I don't like the anytime goal scorer line for him, but Ryan Gault is the first goal scorer of the match, plus 450. I'll take it.
That's your Bet365 bets of the day. Open an account at Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Jeff Paterson coming up next.
Normally when we talk about Greta Bar YVR, we're telling you make it a game night at Greta, and we're talking about hockey. Of course, we're not quite yet at hockey season, but game night can mean whatever it means, and that could mean soccer or football game to watch on the screen, or your own games, because the arcade is half the fun at Greta Bar YVR. Make it your game night at 50 West Cordova, and of course, great food and drink specials, and you can also make it a late game night as they're open late every single night. So make it a late game night, your game night at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova.
Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, and this next interview brought to you by Mr. Lube. Mr. Lube and Tires. Change your oil, change your wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com. Download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear hybrid wiper blades with any oil change. Only for a limited time at Mr. Lube with 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, the host of Rink Wide Vancouver, joins us on the first Canucks game day of the new season. Kind of. Jeff, how you doing?
You have to ask. It's hockey season. Come on. Yes, I won't be in Penticton for Young Stars. I'll make my way for main camp. So getting my hooks into hockey will be delayed by a handful of days. But I'll be an interested observer from a distance, obviously, at Young Stars, and we'll see how that provides a springboard for some of these prospects into the main camp that starts on Thursday.
And of course, we'll do the scouting for you because we're going to be there for Young Stars.
We're going to be there.
So we'll have
trustworthy sources on the scene. Yes.
Hey, how about Manny Malhotra being back in the Canucks colors? That was fun to hear from Manny yesterday as head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks.
Yeah, and I had a chance to be around him out at development camp in the summer, and that was his first chance to be on the ice. And it must be bizarre for a guy coming back into the fold to step onto the ice at the summer development camp at UBC. You'd be familiar with a few of the names, but putting faces to names and then finding out a little bit more about each of these players. And if you remember the summer development camp, they had to bring in a bunch of invitees because they didn't have enough sort of prospects in the system to really round out two full teams. So it was a reduced scrimmage. It was a reduced camp. And some of the guys that were at that camp aren't part of the fold here. So for Manny, there's been a bunch of learnings going on here, trying to identify the players that he's got to work with and how many he'll have in Abbotsford for the upcoming hockey season. But he sounded excited just watching and listening to his sort of post-first practice interview, working the rust off from summer hockey and trying to get guys focused and on task. And now it's 3 games in 4 nights with a bunch of prospects. And ultimately the outcome isn't the most important thing here. It really is trying to drill down on systems and just get guys thinking the way that Manny wants them to play, especially for the ones that he's going to have under his care in Abbotsford all season long out in the AHL.
We've always said this about youngsters, though. I do want to see moments, right? You're right. The totality of a game, reviews of an entire game, those are really tough and perhaps unfair for young guys thrown together like this. But I do want to see those flashes of something of what you look like at your best if you're a young player.
Without a doubt. And I always think, too, from a coaching perspective, you get a power play and you're just throwing guys that they haven't had a chance to work on the special teams. So I think you just lean on your most skilled players and hope that their instincts carry them in those situations. Look, there's going to be a ton of eyes on Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Mine will be there as well. This is the featured performer for the Vancouver Canucks. But beyond that, and I thought it was great that Manny and the coaching staff put Lekkerimäki with Aatu Räty and Archie Bains on day one of practice. Put him in a position to succeed. Set him up with guys that have been there and done that, have both played in the National Hockey League, albeit briefly, but had fine seasons in the American Hockey League. These are experienced players at a showcase like this one. Räty at center, I think, is interesting because he finished the season strong in Abbotsford, but he did it on the wing. And so I was curious to see organizationally, where did they have him slotted? And it looks like they've got him back in the middle. So he's one of the guys that I have high hopes for. Bains and Sas, obviously, older players, experienced players. Archie Bains was an AHL All-Star last year, and here he is at Young Stars again. And then defensively, Elias Pettersson, D. Petey, I'm really excited to see what he looks and does in his first full season here in North America. And the other guy that I'm going to have my eye on this weekend and then on to main camp is Kirill Kudryavtsev, who has impressed every time I've seen him. He's had strong showings in Penticton in the past. He looked good out at the summer development camp in UBC. He's ready to turn pro if there's a spot for him on the Abbotsford roster this year. So there's another guy that I would have high hopes for at a weekend like this in the South Okanagan.
Jeff, do you think there's any chance of a Bains or a Lekkerimäki or a Ratu making this team out of camp, or is the presence of Amon, Phil DiGiuseppe, and Sammy Blais on a PTO, are they blockers to any of the young guys making this team out of camp?
Yeah, when it comes to the numbers game, I think they're in tough, but that's what camp is for ultimately, and the preseason as well. But I think it's safe to say that they would have to have a Herculean effort to really set themselves apart. And we know this much with this management group. When it comes to Lekkerimäki, they want this guy to be the player that they think he is, but we've also seen they have built out the player development staff. They lean on the farm system. They sent Hoaglander down. They sent Podkolzin down, and we're in no rush to bring those guys back to the National Hockey League. And so for Lekkerimäki, I think adjusting to North American ice, playing against pros over here, although he has played professionally in Sweden, I think there's still a fair bit of growth in his game that if he doesn't touch NHL ice this year, it's not a disappointment. If he does, it means that he has done the things that this organization wants to see from him. But I think he's a long shot, especially out of camp. Injuries, nobody can predict, right? And opportunities may present themselves somewhere along the road. But just those players that you mentioned towards the bottom of the lineup, all of those guys have NHL experience. Sammy Blais should be motivated. I'm curious to see what he looks like and what he can do, and ultimately how he approaches life on a PTO here. You have to make an impression. You're starting behind and you have to rise above. Good isn't going to be good enough for a player on a PTO. He has to bump somebody that's under contract right now to earn his opportunity. So he should be hungry. And when he's on his game, he can be a pain to play against. And we'll see if we see shades of that from a guy like Sammy Blais at main camp.
Weaving together these last two answers, do you think, and maybe it's just the simplest answer is it's on an individual case basis here, but does the relationship change between the NHL club and the AHL club now that Manny is there? Do you think that how they treat these kids in terms of looks up and all, do you think that Manny Malhotra changes how that all works?
I don't. I think they felt really comfortable with Jeremy Collin, a guy that had NHL head coaching experience. Look, Manny's got to prove himself.
Yeah, true.
And I mean, oodles of playing experience and assistant coaching experience, but this is a new role for him. And so I think there'll be learnings on both sides, but I don't think fundamentally having this coach, a different coach in place at Abbotsford, changes the mindset of the management group that oversees the entire operation here. They lean on their minor league affiliate. It's here in Abbotsford now. It's a lot easier logistically, obviously, than it was when it was in Utica. And we've seen them make pretty good use of the farm system here, whether it's just bringing in guys for a game or two or guys that have earned their opportunity. In the case of an Arshdeep Bains, have a look, see what he can do. Although I still maintain for Arshdeep Bains, his NHL debut is the best he has looked at the big league level. Since then, I think there's been a little bit of slippage in his two brief stints in the National Hockey League, but he's a hungry guy. He's motivated. He's shown that he's a quick learner. He'll be better for those two opportunities. And so I would expect that he'll have a strong weekend in Penticton and carry that over into main camp. But yeah, whether it's Ratu, whether it's Bains, whether it's Lekkerimäki, I think all those guys are destined to start the season in the American Hockey League and then have to prove themselves and work their way back up unless the Canucks run into some sort of rash of injuries through the preseason.
Jeff, we were having the conversation yesterday with where the club is positioned in its competitive cycle. Would you be willing to move Lekkerimäki or Wielander this year? Are they untouchable in your eyes, or are they pieces that the Canucks should consider moving in the right deal for the benefit of the big club?
Feels to me like it's all about winning now. And when you look at 2 more years of Thatcher Demko and 3 years of Quinn Hughes, that kind of feels like the real timeline. Now, they've committed to others, obviously, much longer, and they're going to have a decision on Brock Besser. I get that. And so you can never lock it down to a 1 or 2 year window. But Quinn Hughes is going to double and then some his salary, right? Like that is going to change the landscape for the Vancouver Canucks, who are already dealing with one massive contract in Elias Paterson, and there's going to be a bigger one coming for Quinn Hughes, and what happens with Demko. So there's some uncertainty down the line. I get the cap's going up, all of that, but they've got players locked in to contracts that are team friendly. You know, it's funny, always before the start of the season, you read these best value contracts in the National Hockey League, and they're always guys that are on league minimum or $1.5 million. Quinn Hughes is one of the best value contracts in the National Hockey League, hands down, full stop, making what he's making right now and delivering Norris trophies and 92 points. But that's not going to last a whole lot longer, but they do have 3 more years of Quinn Hughes at this team-friendly price point. So if it is all about making this team in the here and now better, I don't think you can look at anybody as untouchable, although I will say for a team that has been without a young right-shot defenseman seemingly forever, going back to Chris Tanev, I suppose, as a guy that they've groomed, and before that, Kevin Bieksa, Willander seems more untouchable to me than Lekkerimäki. I just think, given the position, the handedness, all those types of things. But look, if they move either one of them, next year's young stars, we're going to be talking about 24 and 25-year-old players again, because there really isn't a ton in the pipeline. There are some pieces. There are some guys that they hope continue to grow and develop into National Hockey Leaguers, but in terms of frontliners, we all know that there just aren't a whole lot of prospects there, and Lekkerimäki is certainly one of them. He's the shining piece heading into this week in Penticton, and so I'd hate to see them trade a player like that, but at the same time, if it's about winning the Stanley Cup, and that is the demand of another team, it depends what the Canucks are getting in return. But no, I can't sit here and say that I think, in the eyes of management, that Jonathan Lekkerimäki is untouchable at this stage.
Improving this team is going to be interesting going forward, and perhaps it will reveal itself as the season goes on, but there's not an obvious contract that fans are clamoring to get off the books right now. For years, that was the case. There was, a couple of beacons on the roster. Oh, we want to move on from that contract. Jeff, I was looking at it, like even if they wanted to trade a big name, a big time prospect, a first round pick, it has to be tied to something to bring in a player of import for the cap space purposes. And I'm not sure who's so obvious to be moving out right now. I mean, again, if somebody has a stinker of a start to the season, perhaps that reveals itself. But right now, for the first time in forever, Jeff, you look at the roster and you think, I'm okay with everybody right now starting the season.
Right. I mean, for how many years was there a segment of the fan base that truly was counting down to July 1st, 2024, so that Tyler Myers would be off the books?
Right.
And then they go and commit 3 more years to him at half of his previous salary. But that's not a salary. Yeah, he's still here in some form or fashion. Obviously, the Brock Boeser watch is on now, and that one's going to be curious to see how it plays out. But given the season that he had, he strikes me as a pretty integral part of what they've got going on here. And I don't see this idea of the Canucks being competitive and yet getting the trade deadline and moving Brock Boeser. Like, you just don't see competitive, contending teams move a massive piece like that, especially their leading goal scorer from the previous season. And so you're right. I guess if Lekkerimäki continues to develop as a right shot goal scorer, Connor Garland, another year burned off his contract. Is Garland a contract that they'd be looking to get off of just to create some cap space? And yet we saw it's unconventional with Connor Garland, but how effective he can be and what a play driver he is and the chemistry that he's got with Dakota Joshua. So you're right. There's not an obvious candidate, that one albatross of a contract that everybody would love to see moved somehow, some way. But they still don't have the cap flexibility that Jim Rutherford spoke about on day one when he took over and sort of pounded the desk about getting the cap cushion was the word he used then. They're still up against it and still hamstrung to the point that there isn't a lot of flexibility there.
There's also still no practice facility and still maroon seats at Rogers Arena. So there's a lot of things that are lingering here. Jeff, Kevin Lankinen and the situation at goal. First of all, tell me what happened at Milford, because it very much looked like Thatcher Demko was held out of that. And secondly, where are you in terms of fortifying the crease, whether that's Kevin Lankinen or someone else, if there's uncertainty around Thatcher Demko's ability to be ready for the home opener?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's so much uncertainty around Thatcher Demko, and I think there was on Monday as well. There was some suggestion that he may have been at Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau's funeral. He was a teammate of both at Boston College, and that would be totally understandable if he was on hand there. But to the best of my knowledge, he wasn't at the Northview Golf and Country Club for the Jake Milford for whatever reason. Artur Silovs was. Now, this is the burning question. Less than a week out from main camp. They're on the ice on Thursday up in Penticton. And guys, it's just been such a wild summer with Thatcher Demko, who pushed so hard to get back. And I mean, game day storyline, game 7 against Edmonton was he going to be a surprise starter? Ultimately, he wasn't. But if the Canucks had got through, was he going to be ready for the Dallas series? And now here we are on the cusp of training camp, and he's not ready for camp, and we're still not certain whether there was a procedure, and if so, what? Like the uncertainty is wild. And we know, and we've seen it elsewhere, that you can put together a powerhouse team. You can stack your roster, and it can all be undone in a real hurry if you don't have goaltending. And I say this with all due respect to Artur Silovs, who was terrific in the playoffs. He has 9 regular season games under his belt. Yep. He has more playoff performances now than he does regular season. And just go back to Spencer Martin, who earned a contract to be a backup, and I think would have been a totally fine and capable, competent backup. But the minute the starter goes down and you're thrust into that number 1 position, and you know it, I almost feel like Silovs was thrown off the deep end in the playoffs and didn't even have time to really process it all. Just get out there and play. But if you know you're going to be the guy night in, night out in the regular season, Spencer Martin wasn't up to the challenge. Colin Delia wasn't up to the challenge. Those guys weren't built to be NHL starters, and we'll see about Artur Silovs. I think there's higher hopes organizationally for Silovs, but it is a different calculus altogether when you're asked to be the starter in the absence of your number 1 guy. And look, when Thatcher Demko is healthy and on his game, as good as anybody in the NHL, was the runner-up to Connor Hellebuck for the Vezina. Remember the first 6 weeks or so last year, he was lights out good, was such a huge part of the reason the Canucks got off to the start they did. Now he got a ton of run support as well. Just about everything fell the Canucks' way in the first 6 weeks of the season. But here we are, and nobody knows. And that's the thing. Like, Thatcher Demko is going to get healthy. He'll play. My question isn't, when are we going to see him? It's more about, can he stay healthy now? And I think that's where the conversation has moved with this player, unfortunately, who, again, when he is healthy and on his game, pretty much the best in the business. But injuries are now part of the Thatcher Demko story, whether he likes it or not. And it's my understanding he doesn't like it and is sort of fed up with this idea that he's injury prone. And yet, is he available? Was he available in the playoffs?
Yeah. I hope in his own mind, guys, that he realizes that 50 games is probably where he should be. Like, goalies love to believe that they can pull a Roberto Luongo and start 72 games a season. I hope Demko, after all of this, is just honest with himself, and nobody's doubting his greatness, but his greatness should be reduced to 50 games in the regular season so that he can play in the playoffs. And you hope that he's at peace with that in his own mind.
Well, and you always come back to availability, right? You can be great on paper. We can talk about your greatness, but if you can't be there to prove it, this is the one thing. He had the bubble where he was thrown in sort of a la Silovs, but he hasn't had a start-to-finish playoff run in the National Hockey League. And here all these other guys last spring got this experience that they had been lacking of postseason hockey, the Stanley Cup playoffs with fans in the stands, not the whatever that was in the bubble a few years ago. And so a lot of these guys now have that as a baseline to lean on. And Thatcher Demko, who was there and traveling and around the team, but made the first start on night 1 against Nashville, and that was it for him. So I hope, I'm with you, Blake, that I hope there's a mindset shift here. We know how competitive he is. We've heard from Canucks management about how, they've had to pull him off the ice. And if that's the case, so be it. Step in. Somebody's going to have to say, whoa, like, it's not about being at your best in November and early December. We need you around to prove your greatness when the chips are truly down after the regular season. And so really, I mean, on so many levels, interested to see when we see him back on the ice, how quickly can he get back to game speed? Because we saw how hard he worked, and he talked about, he thanked the medical staff for coming in late at night and 2-a-days in his rehab to get ready for those games just before the playoffs. And ultimately he was back for 3 games and then he was gone again. So yeah, just a ton of uncertainty. And to your question, Matt, ultimately about Kevin Lankin, like I'm still firmly in the camp here on a Friday that there will be an additional goaltender on the ice in Penticton with NHL experience. And I think you owe it to your players. Like, this is training camp. They want to face NHL shooters as well, right? Like, it doesn't really serve a purpose to have your best skaters out there facing guys that can go back to junior or are, on the sort of the borderline, the fringes of the AHL or the ECHL. So even if it's Andy Ranta on a pro tryout, this guy's got NHL experience. He's played for Rick Tocchet down in Arizona. I think you could go that direction. And I'm not sure how many offers or opportunities Kevin Lankinen has, but if you hear that, like, that's the clock ticking towards training camp. If sure, the Canucks have lowballed him, I get that part of it. That's all part of negotiation, but I just don't know how many better offers he thinks will be coming his way to be in the National Hockey League. Either way, I'm expecting that there'll be a goaltender added to the roster here before camp.
Excellent. Lastly, Jeff, only because all 3 days we've talked about it this week, we've invoked your name. Quinn Hughes shooting for 20 goals, specifying Jake DeBrusk saying 25 to 35. What do you make of the spoken and now public goals for goal scoring? Yes, proclamations. It's Brock Besser from 2 years ago, Jeff.
Optimism abounds at this time of the year. They're all going to score 50. Look, the number of puck touches that Quinn Hughes gets in a game, for him to go from 17 to 20 seems absolutely doable. The power play over the second half, or at least from the All-Star break, we all saw that it cratered. If he could add a power play goal here or there, I think he can, again, bump his total from 17 to 20. So I think 20 is eminently doable if he's going to get to 100 points. And maybe that's raising the bar, but that's what this guy does for himself, is raise the bar. If he's going to get to 100, I think he's probably got to score 20 as a minimum. I think Garrett Carlson, when he got to 101, was 25 goals and 76 assists. So for Quinn Hughes, I love the fact, like, he goes home in the summer, he addresses his season. There wasn't much to pick at last year, but he said he was working on changing the angle and getting that shot off, beat the first guy, the high guy, and creating shooting lanes and all those types of things. We saw evidence of that last year. If he can continue to refine his game, I think 20 is well within his reach. And part of that is, if Elias Paterson gets back to form, how many times can he set up Quinn Hughes? If Philip Hronek has a better second half, how many more times can he move the puck to Quinn Hughes? So I think there are ways for improvement here for Quinn Hughes in the hockey club. And Jake DeBrusk, 27 goals twice in the NHL. I don't think 30 is out of the question at all. Certainly over the course of the contract, I hope that there's a 30-goal season in there. But I do think that there are other ways that Jake DeBrusk is going to show his value to the hockey club, whether it's penalty killing, his speed, on power play, all those types of things. But just in terms of raw numbers, yeah, absolutely. I think Jake DeBrusk, let's set the bar. There's nothing wrong with setting the bar a little higher. I'm not saying 40, but I think 30 is certainly a target for a guy like Jake DeBrusk.
Awesome stuff. Jeff, thank you for this. Have a great weekend. You'll be in for Blake at one point next week, and we'll catch up then.
Sounds good. You guys enjoy all that the South Okanagan has to offer at this time of the year, which is plenty, including a hockey showcase. Make sure that you're taking a little bit of the hockey showcase. And we'll catch up next week.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Some Price from the historic Wall Center, and what a treat here on a Friday to welcome into the Nation Network studio, the relatively new head coach of the Canadian men's national team. It's our pleasure to have Jesse Marsch in studio. How you doing, guys? Coach?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
What brings you to town?
Yeah, we've been having some meetings with people from the Whitecaps, from people in the soccer community here in Vancouver. We're also really trying to do some fundraising for our program. So meeting with some potential donors and, just people in the community that I think are connected to the sport and connected to our team. And we're trying to build momentum to 2026.
I mean, people have griped, and a lot of it is unfounded, but people have griped that, too much time in Toronto. But it sounds like you guys are trying to branch out a little bit and be a little bit more representative.
Yeah, and you're right. I haven't been on the job that long, but I've heard that.
Yes.
Around town. Okay, so yes, we were at BC Place yesterday, and we met with the people that help run that venue, and we talked to them about getting grass in there more often so we can get some good opponents and have some more matches there. Obviously, with the World Cup in 2 years, we know that we're going to play a lot of matches here in Vancouver. So although we may not be here all the time right now, I think the people in Vancouver have something really special to look forward to in 2026.
You've had quite a run here since you took the job. First of all, like, I think people knew that, this is a different level of coach that they brought aboard. For those that haven't got your European resume in front of you, or not even European resume, your coaching resume, you were a player, you leave the play and you start your coaching journey, your odyssey, where?
Well, I mean, my head coaching, I started in Montreal, right? I was coaching a lot when I was playing. And then I went straight into being the assistant coach for the U.S. national team for the 2010 World Cup. And then I went to Montreal, and so it was a big step in my life, I think, to be a head coach, to go and take that team from the lower division. I think it was the USL then, and then up to the MLS. It was a big challenge, and I had a lot of, I think, failures there, but I had some successes and I learned a lot. And I was really appreciative of the time there and the players that I got to coach and the challenges that were involved with that. But and maybe you're leading into this a little bit, but it gave me a window into Canada and Canadian soccer and communities here and people here. And so I think now where I sit, that wound up being a very valuable experience and something that I think has prepared me to at least understand a little bit what's going on up here.
Reading about your background, Jesse, it's almost like, seems like Bob Bradley had you ticketed as a coach in waiting as a young player back in Chicago. This comes naturally to you by the looks and sounds of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I like my full profession or like being labeled as a coach. It feels very old schoolish kind of
limiting.
Yeah. But that's what I am, and so I've loved this sport. It's been really good to me. I think I've had incredible experiences. Bob had a big influence on me, right? I met him. So I was a pretty naive young kid and made a lot of bad decisions, but I figured out pretty early on that Bob Bradley was a little bit special. And so, he helped get me into Princeton. So I think he should take more credit than I should for figuring these things out. But he kind of set the tone for what higher level soccer was like in training and mentality. And he was sometimes a son of a bitch, but he was also, I think, a really good mentor and a very demanding coach in really good ways.
Blake and I have been doing the show 13 years together here and have chronicled the rise of this sport in Canada and the U.S. You're one of the few North Americans to break through at the higher levels of coaching and over in Europe. How have you done it?
Well, I had a lot of people that believed in me and invested in me. And when I don't know if you guys know this, but Vancouver Whitecaps turned me down in 2014, and I was a finalist with Carl Robinson.
No
and so now, Greg Kerfoot was a really good guy to meet with. I saw Bob Lenarduzzi yesterday. A lot of I was out at the Whitecaps training ground, and I've told all of them it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because then I went to the New York Red Bulls, and I that was my window into Europe, was the Germans and Austrians who were running that club or that organization, and they believed in me. They invested in me. I invested in them. I had to learn German. I didn't have to, but I did. And then they were adamant about me coming to Europe, and they loved the story of kind of the extension to America and what I represented in that sense. So, yeah, I would say I'm almost like a German trained coach, which I think is a good thing because they're very detailed. They're very organized. It's a great, rich footballing nation. And I was really thankful for the experience.
For those a lot of stars on that national team sweater.
Yes,
too.
yeah. For those that don't know Red Bull soccer, it has a brand. It has a style attached to it, whether you're in Salzburg or New York or wherever. Are you playing Red Bulls soccer with Canada?
Yeah, it's rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's hit you in the mouth and go after them and make them uncomfortable. And then also, I think it accelerates players' development. So it's not the exact version, but it is a version of what I liked to coach. And every time that I would be talked about in national team circles, not just the US or Canada, but different places, there was always this stupid, ignorant commentary that you can't have a style of play with the national team, which then what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
You're just come together and then just put them on the pitch. You have to have a style of play. I don't care what sport you're talking about and what team. Is
it 11 individuals if you don't have a style of play?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, regardless, your job and when you're a coach or when you're a team is to be bigger than the sum of the parts, right? And the way you do that is you have a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has been great. And it was good because I met with a lot of national team coaches in Europe before I took this job, and I asked them a bunch of questions, but one of them was, all right, what do you get out of trying to implement a style of play? And look, you would get different versions of it from different people, but my main mentor in Germany is a guy named Ralph Rangnick, and he coaches Austria now. And he was like, I do almost exactly the same thing I do with a club.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, let's go for it.
I want to take you back to the late winter, early spring of this year. We're all fretting about who is going to coach this team and when is he going to get here, because we got a pretty good squad, got a chance to do something at this expanded Copa that we were all so excited about. You get hired on May 13th. 3 weeks later, you're on the pitch in the Netherlands and you lose 4-0. And we're all sitting there going, they didn't give the coach enough runway. This could be a disaster. Where are you? Where's your mindset after 4-0 against the Netherlands, knowing you've only got the France match to sort of get things right before we get going for real?
We were clinging to, it was a good first half.
Yeah.
It was a good first half.
Well, I would even go, I think it was the third training session, and I kind of was walking off the pitch with Mauro Biello and the coaching staff, and I said, look, we could have a tough summer. But I know now working with these guys that we will be good. And it was because you could see their ability to adapt and learn, and you could see their mentality to do everything they could to follow what I was presenting. And look, when I took the job, here are the first 7 games. Okay. It's Holland, it's France, then it's Argentina, Peru, Chile, and then it's US and Mexico. So I thought, all right, so we'll go 0-7,
and then we'll be okay.
And then everyone will hate me, and then we'll build the team, But I knew first half against Holland, and I knew that they were a good team. We played well, and I knew that, and I made some changes in the game that I was just trying. I needed to see guys on the pitch, and if it would have been a match that was more meaningful, I would have operated differently, right? And so, but we gained some important lessons out of that match, and then I gained more information about player personnel, and then it was then key for me to reinforce the things that were going to make them better, and I had a few just check mark things that I knew right away that if they understood why things were good and why things were bad, and if we were able to implement those lessons in the next match, that we would be better in that match. I didn't expect us to play so well against France as we did, but I knew, again, I could tell that we were going to be good.
Copa was a hell of a ride. It was a mess, and you've commented on that parts of it just were not professional, and we saw that from the outside even. But was it fun just to be in the mix again, just to have that heat and to have games of import again? Like it looked like, as much as you were kind of in a blender there, both because of the tournament and you were still new to the gig, what was that experience like in terms of just being in the mix again?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, if you go, it's been a long time. Probably the last time I had a team that we were in matches where we knew we would win and we knew we were better was in Austria when I was in Salzburg. And when we played some league matches, you knew we were better. But, for the last 3 years that I've coached, it's always been, all right, here we go. Some high level games, Champions League matches, best teams in the world, best coaches in the world, best players in the world. So in some ways, I would have it no other way. Mm-hmm. Like, one of the things that'll be tougher for me is when we start playing, at some point, we will have some lesser opponents, and that won't be, I'll still have to motivate in myself and the team in all the right ways to know that we still have to capitalize on every moment. But I wasn't fazed by any of it. And either were, and I think they could kind of look. You would have to speak to the players a little bit, but I feel like they fed off of my confidence and my understanding of what these games were and what it was going to require. And they were looking at me. They could kind of be like, "All right, we're good. We're good here. We're ready."
Mhm.
So, but a lot. It's been a pleasure to work with these guys.
Yeah.
Like there's no egos in the team. They love to be with each other, play with each other. They love to play for the national team. They're really a fun, special team and great character, almost too good. So I've been telling them, like, we need more guys we could use a couple of egos, like, guys who are really want to push the envelope.
You have Richie stirring shit up, but other than that,
even Richie's too nice, man. I tell you, but they're great. They're great lads. Really, they're great lads.
So for us as a Canadian soccer public, this is also very new, Jesse, with the men's national team. Like, it is the mind-blowing emoji, to sit there and watch our players go toe-to-toe on a pitch with the likes of, global giants like Lionel Messi and Suarez.
Yeah.
Did you sense any starstruckness from the players? Because that's something that we wondered about going into these matches.
No. I mean, look, one of the things is Messi now plays in MLS. So some of them had already played against Messi, or most of them. And so that effect wasn't quite the same. And the France game could have been that moment, right? But then Mbappe was a little hurt, so he didn't start, and he came off the bench, and he almost torched us a few times. But and then there's a number of guys playing in Europe and playing in Champions League that have these experiences more. And now I think we're going to get it even more because we were from a good Copa able to get more players in bigger clubs, and we'll grow with their experiences. So this was an important summer. Probably I didn't realize at the time how important it was because I was just like, all right, we got to get this thing started. But the fact that we have momentum now in so many ways will be a major benefit for us in 2026.
We do want to get some player reviews. We're going to do some rapid fire sort of player reviews before you leave. But let's quickly address just the window that just passed. 2 hours of my life that I'll never get back versus Mexico.
Me too.
But it was really fun versus the US, and it's a friendly. But did the guys feel like there was a little something at stake there because they had some giddy up?
Yeah, I think we knew, and we even talked about the fact that this was a measuring stick for us, and that we believed that we made major progress, but we had to. Your next test is always the most important test, right? So I think we were excited about the US. In the US, they wanted to make it about me. But within our team, it was about us and what we were trying to accomplish. And the focus and concentration on that was at a really high level. So I knew we would play well. Like, look, first half should be 4-0, right? We smoke them. We smoke them. And we're still that's a little bit where we are in our stage as well, as we don't really have that ruthlessness yet, where when we're on top of teams and we've got our thumb on them that we bury them, so but we'll get there. We will get there. But I mean, the it's been very linear. It's been right now we've had a lot of success and we keep building. There's going to be a game where we have a little bit of a slip up and then we'll have to readjust. But I think the reason it's been linear is because the players are in there. They see the benefits. They have a strong belief. They have quality and they're smart. And so we've been able to all together push the right buttons to keep pushing.
You mentioned U.S. media wanting to make it about you. How much have you paid attention to this? The one that got away, he's up there coaching Canada. Meanwhile, our program is in shambles. Why isn't he here? How much of attention have you paid to that?
Well,
we're greatly amused by it. Do you understand?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised because over the years, my access to what's been going on there hasn't always been positive, right? But one of the beauties here is we know that we have work to do. Right. And so it gives us a platform to say, all right, look, there's been some slip ups. There's been some things that need to be ironed out. But I think from here, we're going to launch this thing in a way to really create a foundation. And, Kevin Blue is sitting right here. And I'm not just saying this because he's my boss and he's in the room, but he's the most important person right now in Canadian soccer. And I know that he will have ability to structure this in a way where we can have better youth national team programs, where we can have a better connections to the professional teams and the clubs, and where we can really create more of a development path and identify players at young ages and put them in good training and develop them the right way. All of this needs to be supported by finances, by structure, by education, and he will wind up being the most important appointment in this country's sports history. And then I'm along to help any way I can, and to try to use my experiences to help, reinforce and continue the development that's been taking place. And look, I say there's a lot that needs to be done, but there's a lot of good that's already happened. And that's the proof of that is the player pool, right? I mean, it's not like we're taking over a nation that has had no idea of how to raise some important players. We clearly have a special player pool.
Well, and Blake and I talked about this also for the entire time we've been doing the show. Like, how is a country where every little boy and girl play soccer at some point? Why haven't we been able to produce the elite players? We have them now, including Alphonso Davies. A word or two, your thoughts and observations now that you've had a chance to coach the young man.
He is dying, I think, for investment in him, right? And he as good as he is, I think he knows he can be so much better.
What do you mean by that, investment in him?
Well, I think, he's always at Bayern. I think he's considered the kid that can be really good, that plays on the left. They don't really invest in him in terms of the fabric of what the team is, in terms of the leadership, but partly because he's young, partly because he's a foreigner. I've been to Germany. Germany is very German centric. They accept foreigners, especially if they're good players. So I think they've accepted Alphonso fully, but he's not part of their leadership group.
Cornerstone. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he with it, it's not high performing individuals. They don't just consider themselves talented. They consider themselves like eager to prove and show how good they can be. And that's what Fonzie, he I think just wants to be invested in and pushed and given the clues as to how he can keep going and to be the best that he can possibly be. And for us as a nation, I think it's a perfect time for him to be the captain, for him to be invested in, for him to be called on more and I think even with some of the documentary type stuff that's out there, you can see that he's becoming so much more than just a good left-sided player, right? So
his defensive side has rounded really into. We've seen this in the last 2 games for sure, but even beyond that into Copa, where his defensive play is improving so much. We used to ask, should he play more forward so that he can be involved offensively? We saw him as a Whitecap and soon after that as a spectacular offensive player. The only thing is you've got depth now forward on the pitch where you don't necessarily need to ask him to do that. Is it still tempting though to get him further up?
Yeah, and we use him as a left back defensively, and we ask him to push up the field more as an attacker, and the way we create some rotations. He could be more aggressive for sure in the attacking part of the pitch and really join in and be part of what we do from an attacking perspective. But I think he's really trying to also focus on how to play his role and tactically be connected with what we're asking. And I think he trusts his teammates more than he maybe did in the past, where he doesn't feel like, and I've reinforced that with him. Like, I'm like, you don't have to be everything for this team.
That goal against Panama, he just said, no, I'm doing this all. And he just did it all, right?
Look, and he can't. I mean, he has that ability, but I think he knows for him to be at his, for the team to be at his best, he just needs to be good at what he does. And he doesn't have to have the solutions for everything. Now, there will be times where maybe we push him up the pitch or where, he will have the opportunity to have a bigger impact in the offensive part of the pitch. But I've really just kind of been on him to just be himself and be the best version of what we need from him, and to trust that that's the best thing that's what we need for the team. And I think it's seen that we have a really solid foundation of like tactically what we're doing. We could talk about the Mexico game, and you said, but Mexico was afraid of us.
Yeah.
They were. They just wanted to follow us, limit our space, limit our ability to get out into the open space and attack. And it was an effective strategy. But what a statement! right? What a statement.
Staggering,
yeah.
Jesse, staggering.
So I think we're developing something that even other people are recognizing and going, hey, what's going on up in Canada?
Last question from me, Coach. You're playing Panama in Toronto on October 15th, and the release from Canada Soccer talked about another match in the international window. Are you time's a little short on that? Or are you?
It's going to be a different kind of window for us, and we'll make an announcement probably here soon. But I don't want to ruin any. But we're going to do something special, something that will involve the community, and so we're waiting. Hopefully, we'll make an announcement here in a week or so, and we're excited about what the plan will be.
Okay.
Brought in Nico Seeger. Any other dual nationals you got your eye on? Anybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to put any pressure out there. I mean, you could probably know the names that we're talking to, but we've had very positive discussions and interactions with some important players, and I'm hopeful that by the end of the year that we can start to solidify a few more guys into the group.
Maybe steal from some of your chief rivals. There's
That'd
Mexican, Canadian.
That would be good.
Yeah,
that would be good.
Just lastly, when are we going to see you here at BC Place playing a game?
Good question. Like I said, we're the key is getting grass in there. Because I think part of it is also getting the right kind of opponents and for sure our players to play on the right kinds of pitches as well. So next year we are focused on trying to solidify a few different things. Like even in the talks is maybe like a January type camp where like the US has done over the years, where then we call in some young players and then maybe we get some opponents and then maybe it's a possibility to get we're working on different things. All right, but I've been asked that again. We go through it. We're going to get some games here.
So Blake can attest because I've banged this drum for a long, long time. You mentioned grass. As you well know, you're from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We are a multi-sport society here, right?
Yeah.
Like we play more than just soccer. A lot of these countries, it's soccer, soccer, soccer.
Yeah.
Why not embrace turf? Why not turn turf into our advantage? We bring teams over, they whine and complain about playing on turf, but we're okay because we just play regardless of the surface.
No. Look, there will be times that we can use it as an advantage. And I think the previous regime with John and going up to Edmonton and playing some games here, this was really clever, right? And you're right. Why not use what we have to our advantage and freeze some tamales? You know what I mean? I'm all with you on that. But it's about player safety a little bit, right? Like we already are asking these guys to travel all over the world and come and play matches. And we want to just make sure that we put them in an environment where we're not damaging them in their careers and making sure that we're keeping them healthy and clean. And so, but we're not, it's not the end all be all. Like we'll find times to make this work. Like we'll find times.
We'll let you get out of here and watch the Pochettino press conference so that you can be, exactly.
All right.
Can you conjure some animosity towards Posh about
no, he's a good man.
Yeah,
he's a good man, really good man, and I think he'll do a good job. I think I'm looking for this will be great.
It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be a lot of fun, Jesse.
No doubt.
We've already had a blast here with Canadian soccer over the last 2 years, and the best is yet to come. Thank you, sir, for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.